Today's sermon is titled Faith, the Elmer's Glue of Belief, to be delivered by Randy Schwalbe. Randy's history with religion resembles a kaleidoscope in action. He was baptized as an infant at the insistence of his maternal grandparents, but was not raised in a religious household. He would occasionally attend church with friends, however, period. While living in Southern California as an adult, he attended church on a regular basis in the capacity of music director, first at the UU Church of Studio City, then the First Lutheran Church in Long Beach, followed by a long stint with the UCC in Torrance with Reverend Paul Lance at the helm. He was our first speaker this year, you may recall. Finally, he served as the choir director at the Presbyterian Church just down the street from here for a brief while. And to round out his ecumenical history, Randy accompanied his mother-in-law to a Catholic church, a Catholic mass every Sunday morning at St. Anthony's Long Beach for 2 years. Good times. With all this said, a disclaimer is warranted. Randy is a self-proclaimed fundamental agnostic. Let's find out if he has an answer to this thing called faith. Randy.
Thank you, Dolores, and good morning, everyone. As we speak, Janet and Joel are traipsing around Greece somewhere with plans to move on to Israel and Jordan. I wonder if they will take a camel ride through Petra, the Red City. This photograph of Mary and me was taken a mere 15 days after that horrific attack on the World Trade Centers back in 2001. I mention this because from September 11 to October 7 of that year was arguably the safest time for Americans to travel in the Middle East. Considering the crazy nature of the world these days, I wished or prayed for Joel and Janet before they departed to be granted traveling mercies. For those of you who are new to this term, traveling mercies is something that is granted by God in order to protect the traveler from harm, meaning anything from delayed flights to suffering from an accident or from hostile marauders. But wait, you might recall Dolores made a disclaimer that I am an agnostic. How can I be asking for something from someone that I lack the ability to affirm its existence? Hey, if I could personally assure that Joel and Janet will have an error-free sojourn to the countries surrounding the Eastern Mediterranean, I certainly would do so. But instead, I must rely on God. And to do that, I must have the unshakable belief that this God entity is capable of granting traveling mercies, not to mention all the other things humans have come to expect of God. And that brings me to the notion of mysticism. God is but one facet of mysticism. The past couple talks I delivered here brought to light the concept of ecomysticism. If any of your senses can perceive the existence of something, it is real. And everything that is real is indeed God, according to Robinson Jeffers. And let's remember, science plays a role in reality. And I'm not going to go off, of course, and lecture about science of facts, but I'll briefly mention that the color of the sky is not a belief. Physics is responsible for the frequency range of the various hues of a midday sky, frequencies ranging from 450 to 485 nanometers on average. And biology is responsible for our brain capturing this frequency via our eyes. And at the same time, through linguistic agreement and learning, assigning this frequency a wholly arbitrary name, in this case, blue. Hence, claiming the sky is blue is not an act of faith. In a nutshell, if your senses can detect something, It does not require an act of faith for it to be so. It just is. However, you could say that faith picks up where our senses leave off. And that is what separates all that is mystic from everything else. If you subscribe only to what your senses sense, then you will likely never have those conversations with God. And another flippant way to look at this is if your senses cannot sense it, then it is non-sensible. But I had better use caution here because I now just relegated 90% of the world's religions as nonsense. I hope God lets me finish this talk before I get smoked by lightning. Okay. Oh, I'm not going to do that. That's terrible. Sorry. Continuing. However, the common thread of mysticism can be thought of as something that requires a means beyond our five senses to make it appear real. And that something is our mind engaging in believing. As Lalo, the nymph, stated from the first reading, nice nymph action, Jan. God and all the other gods don't exist if the human species fails to believe in them. So this is where faith comes in. And I contend it takes an act of faith to believe. It takes an act of faith to believe. Many assert that faith and belief are synonymous, but I contend that belief, or a system of belief, is actually held together by faith. I think of faith as the glue of belief, and without it, the belief system would simply come apart. Another way to express this notion is to think of belief as a structure and faith as the action or element that it takes to hold this structure together. Or if belief is thought of as a living entity, then faith is the nurturing element that keeps the belief alive. You know, the food, the watering, and care. If you lose faith, then the belief fades away as a result. Last Sunday morning, I was part of the Easter service at the Presbyterian Church here in Cambria, providing celebratory music with my trombone quartet. Typically, part of the Easter gig is to sit through the Easter message delivered by the resident minister. Well, Pastor Osimo started off with an amusing anecdote, which I'll share after the service if you wish or are interested. And then he made a claim that I thought was remarkable. He declared that without the resurrection, the Christian faith would be useless. Well, in other words, the entirety of this faith hinges on the miracle of Jesus bringing himself back from the dead and ascending to heaven. Make no mistake, faith is by far the principal means by which Christians practice. One of the standard definitions of faith is a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. When I first encountered this definition, I thought to myself, wow, first, the use of the word belief is not only the second word of that definition, but the first word is strong, as in a strong belief in God. But the wow phrase is spiritual apprehension. Apprehension, as most of you are aware, is the anxiety or fear that something bad or unpleasant will happen. In other words, people of religious faith will choose an unprovable belief versus a fact that has cold, hard evidence. The God gene in action. The pious person will choose the mystic route over the eco-mystic route every time. You just blaspheme God, and moments later, an earthquake strikes. Was that God showing displeasure, or merely a coincidence of nature? Some of you out there might be thinking at this moment, hey, wait, hold on. Faith is not just about believing in the mystic. There's got to be more to faith than that. And you would be correct. After giving this notion of faith some requisite thought, I found faith comes in three varieties. The first is what I have been covering these past few minutes. using your cognitive energies accompanied by strong emotional energy to focus on a mystic belief, God, Christ, not necessarily Jesus, the occult, the afterlife, etc., can be characterized as religious faith. Typical phrases that illustrate this type of faith are, I have faith in God, or your mysticism of choice, or I have faith in the existence of God, or the mysticism of your choice. Often, this faith may very well define you as a person, or more accurately, something you use to define yourself. Yes, I am a person of faith. This would imply you have successfully completed the boot camp of faith. You or others consider yourself to be a certified person of faith. Others may admire you, possibly more for your level of conviction than for your belief system itself. Some may even associate courage with your strong sense of faith. However, that courage may be needed to deal with your skeptic family and friends who may not subscribe to the mystic and may dismiss your faith as false pride. When your faith is challenged, either directly or indirectly, you may feel the need to take up arms by trying to account in scientific terms for the mystical nature of your belief. For those direct confrontations, you might be able to appeal to your detractor's God gene by citing the Bible. Many denominations today support the use of the Bible as the only infallible source of Christian teaching. In other words, the Bible is not to be questioned. Ultimately, it may be best not to discuss religion at the dinner table if you're in mixed company. Then there are those indirects who have decided to initiate a defensive by erecting museums and art experiences filled with irrefutable facts, logic, and even so-called science in a gallant effort to demystify beliefs, thereby overcoming the absence of the five senses, making faith synonymous with fact. Yes, the earth is indeed less than 7,000 years old, and humans did commingle with dinosaurs. I'm not attempting to belittle these efforts, but instead to illustrate to what lengths individuals will go to elevate their faith. This category of faith, the belief of something mystic, is likely the inner foundation, the fundamental core of a pious individual. And society, more often than not, honors this distinction. Our forefathers saw fit to keep God in the narrative in spite of the colonists' rejection of a church-run state. One may ask, why would they seemingly contradict one of their core tenets of independence, the separation of church and state, by referencing God 6 times in the Declaration of Independence? Columnist Anthony Mina of All Things Liberty answers with, and I quote, the resulting Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson and edited by his fellow delegates, contains a theory of rights that depends on the supreme being, not man, for its validity. The Declaration states that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is possible to see in these words an affirmation of the founders' religious faith, but God-given rights had less to do with theology in the summer of 1776 than they did with rebellion. In stating that people's rights were given to them by the Creator, the Continental Congress endowed those rights with a legitimacy that knows no parallel in mortal sources, unquote. To sum it up, the Continental Congress made it impossible for a church state such as England of that time to argue with God. You could reasonably say this country was founded on faith in a supreme being. The second category of faith is closely related to hope, the hope that God will guide you through anticipated challenges. Traveling mercies is an excellent example of this kind of faith. I have faith in the belief of God. Therefore, I have faith that God will grant me traveling mercies by keeping watch over me while I'm away. When you pray before going to bed, asking God to help you get through a critical exam the following morning, you are practicing belief in advance. You are counting on God to bridge that gap between your level of preparedness and the demands of the exam. After you ace the exam the next day, you may find yourself thanking God for coming through, but the experts out there will maintain that your faith energy helped you focus. In other words, you helped God help yourself. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But is it okay to ask God for things or make demands on God? One might be reticent, thinking the request is too trivial, or fear of disappointment, or concerned about appearing selfish. Well, the Bible says it's okay. If you are seeking wisdom, strength, escape from temptation, forgiveness, blessings for others, and yes, even necessary material things. And all this falls in the hope-based category of faith. Then I started to ponder. Actually, I've pondered this since joining the UUCC. Is there a way to have faith in hopefulness without relying on the mystic, God, astrological forecasts, fortune tellers, et al.? Must I rely on someone reading my palm or interpreting tarot cards to ascertain my fate? Am I beholden to the modestly Orphic Ouija board to answer the questions of life, universe, and everything? Oh, heck no. We have ourselves. We have the ability, each one of us, to channel that faith energy to focus on that of which we hope for. Faith in ourselves to connect with our spiritual being, that mystical continuum between your self-awareness, i.e. limitations, and your aspirations. And even though your five senses may not detect it, this continuum can be sensed easily by your intellectual emotions and possibly your subconscious. In essence, this mysticism inside you is real. Your spirituality is real. You cannot readily or physically share it with others, but it can and does express itself in the form of the nature of your character, your values, your passions, how you love others, and how you love yourself. Every Sunday, we take a moment to meditate, to remind ourselves about the availability of this precious tool. On Thursday mornings, Andy has provided a forum for group meditations. There are infinite ways to meditate, but this is the best method for getting in touch with your spirituality, your faith in yourself, to making hope a meaningful approach to a future situation. Now I turn to the third type of faith. Yes, I promised you three, so here's the third one. Trusting faith. The word translated as faith in English language editions of the New Testament can also be translated as belief, faithfulness, or trust. So yes, faith and trust can be synonymous as well. But I wish to focus your attention on how we employ faith when trust is called for in any situation, religious or commonplace. The standard definition of this category of faith is the complete trust or confidence in someone or something. This applies across the board, both mystic and secular. And just an aside here, remember when you were in grade school passing notes to your friend without getting caught by the teacher? Well, you and an anonymous clerk on the other side of that check stand are doing essentially the same thing, but not intentionally nor under the threat of getting caught. Whenever there's an exchange of hard US currency, a little note is attached. In God we trust. What is the meaning of this? Is it a breach in a core tenet of ours, the separation of church and state? Is it our government continuing to affirm the legitimacy of our sovereignty as our forefathers did? Possible answer waits in a future talk, so stay tuned. By the way, If you do not fall into that category of faith in a higher power, then you might feel obliged to remind that receiver of your coins to disregard that message imprinted on them. Yeah. But now I will focus on faith that we practice in our everyday lives. You will be amazed at the types of people to whom you assign your unwavering faith. Let's start with the obvious, your family and friends. In a healthy relationship of, say, a married couple, each spouse will, in their heart of hearts, have faith in each other, uncompromised trust. They know inherently that no matter how rough things get, they will pull through. They also know that the other will remain or will maintain his or her fidelity, i.e. remain faithful, and that neither will resort to verbal abuse or violence. That may sound like an ideal marriage, but it should actually be the minimum standard. But does this carry over to all the members of a family? You would think so, considering blood is thicker than water, but that is a reference to loyalty and love, no matter how crappy a person your sibling may be. But faith is not blood. I love my dad, but I trust him only as far as I can throw him. And this brings me to an important distinction here. Blood comes with the territory. Faith must be earned. This is why you will often find that folks treat their close friends far better than their own flesh and blood. I love you because you are my sister, but I would never loan you the $100 I just loaned to my friend Jake. I just don't have faith in you. To reiterate, trust faith must be earned. The religious faith is, for the most part, learned, especially when the God gene is stimulated. Also, the trust faith does take time to be earned. Many repetitions of good faith acts by others toward you will win your trust, your faith in those others, including family members. One of the spiritual benefits of a community such as ours is that the learning curve is much shorter than normal. In other words, it does not take long for a new member to earn the faith from all of us. And this is precisely why our covenant is so vital. By pledging to this promise, we can move quickly to the finishing touches of a faithful relationship with folks we've known only for a few weeks, just as with those we've known for years. And this is why our potlucks rock. Okay, family and friends are rather obvious candidates for your trust. So who are these amazing types of people that you trust so completely, willing to pledge your total faith in? Your management at work? Possible, but not likely. Your physician? That's a mixed bag. Politicians? No, I'm not touching that third rail. How about perfect strangers? That's right. It's that person behind the wheel of a car heading toward you in the car you are driving, both speeding along at 65 miles an hour on a small 2-lane highway divided by a simple double yellow line down the middle. And let's make it a foggy night to boot. I have described Highway 1 just south of Cambria. From an eighth of a mile apart, it looks to an aerial observer that the two of you are headed on a crash course. But at the point of collision, you safely pass each other in your own lanes, missing each other by just a couple of feet. Was it dumb luck there was no collision? Did God protect both drivers with traveling mercies? Was either driver anticipating imminent doom? No. You were moving along in your lane with the confidence of having a 6-foot concrete wall down the center divider. Faith plays a big role in this scenario and all the countless ones on the world's highways 24/7. All it would take is just a slight flick of the wrist from either driver at just the right moment, and you both would top the 11 o'clock news. Yes, I know that sounds so gruesome, but what is it that keeps us out of trouble on the highways about 99.5% of the time? Faith. Faith in the other drivers and faith in your own ability to drive. And oh, by the way, 99.99999% of those other drivers are indeed perfect strangers to you. yet you entrust your faith in them far more readily than those you know. Now, this may sound freakish, but could we exist as a society without this faith in strangers? How deep is your faith when boarding an airplane? The pilot has the fate of over 100 people, including you, in his hands holding the yoke. You and your family or friends choose a restaurant on a whim while traveling. How much research did you commit to assure that that restaurant is safe? All it really takes to commit faith to that establishment are two things. People are eating there and nobody's being carried out on a stretcher. Good enough, let's eat. Your entire life savings is nestled comfortably in a bank account or various accounts managed by your broker. Your faith in these institutions allows your money not to just sit around, but to actually grow. Without this faith, your money would be nestled comfortably under your mattress or in a large soup can. I think you get the point. This intangible thing called faith plays a highly significant role in our lives. We could not function without it. How many of you have entrusted a key to your home to a neighbor or a dog sitter? Faith. Bona fide or bona fide is a Latin phrase meaning in good faith. This is a trust between two parties for the potentiality of a relationship. Back in the day, ancient Rome that is, bona fide was always assumed by both sides, and it had implied responsibilities as well as both legal and religious consequences if broken. Remember the first type of faith, that of God and gods? In real estate, good faith estimates are used to transact sales and financing. In contract law, the implied covenant of good faith is a general presumption that the parties to a contract will deal with each other honestly and fairly so as not to destroy the right of the other party or parties to receive the benefits of the contract. Interesting. The word covenant sprung up again in this talk. Not to beat a dead horse, that's an awful expression, but our covenant is a contract, and it is a faith that we have in each other that serves as the glue that holds this contract together and the fuel that jettisons it into action. So let's step back for a moment and consider this thing called faith. First of all, none of our five senses can sense it. Does that mean faith is non-sensible? Does that make faith a denizen of mysticism? Must we resign to believing in faith or having faith in faith? This is all starting to sound like crazy talk. So just think of it this way. Faith is that one exception to the rule that something is not real if your five senses cannot sense it. Faith is real. Faith is what keeps our species and all the other species on this planet alive. Take a sobering moment to ponder the level of sanity those few individuals possess who have access to the red nuclear button. We have faith in them, but do we have a choice? So before I finish, there's one thing there's this thing called mala fide, bad faith. This usually applies to those who engage in deception or disingenuousness. Also, what happens when a trust is broken or severed? The faith you had in someone was breached. What then? If the offender is a stranger to you, such as an inebriated driver causing harm to you or your loved ones, time will heal that wound to a point where your trust in humanity will be regained, not necessarily with that offender. However, when a trust is breached between acquaintances, family members, friends, workmates, and the like, from my perspective, the wound can never fully heal. Once a spouse has been caught cheating, that relationship will forever be changed. Yes, forgiveness can and does soften the pain enough so that the relationship can continue, but the scar on that bright, beautiful orb called faith will never go away. So the message today comes down to this. Cherish with all of your being the faith you place in others and the faith others place in you. And this means the faith you place in yourself as well. Have faith and be faithful with sobering intent. Love and trust are the two most precious gifts we possess. Nothing else matters without these two. Actually, time is more precious, but that's a given. All the riches in the world are meaningless by comparison. And the irony of these three greatest gifts, time, love, and trust, is that they are all untouchable. So be it.